Wood at one time was a living thing, and regardless of how it's been dried, it still continues to move. In areas of high humidity, this board will actually expand, and when the humidity drops, it'll actually shrink. And there's a couple of different things that you can do to minimize the appearance of that wood movement. The first is to take a panel like this. This is a panel made of solid hardwood. And in this case, what we've done is we have stained and finished this hardwood panel before it was inserted in the frame. The reason for that is, and I've kind of mocked up a sample here to show you, you can see that this panel moves very slightly in the frame. And had this panel been stained after it was assembled, you would find that that slight movement would expose a very small area of unstained wood near the edge of the panel. Oh, and one final tip, don't glue this panel in the frame. If you do, that panel will not be able to expand and contract with moisture changes, and the panel will actually split. And don't make your tolerances too tight, especially when you're building inset doors like this during the winter time. If you make them too tight, you may not be able to open them in the spring. One of the ways to get around that is provide a little clearance. What we normally suggest if you build these during the winter is 3/32 of an inch all the way around that cabinet door, and during the summer, just a 1/16. I found it sometimes easier for my 3/32 measurement to use a nickel. And as long as that nickel fits on the bottom and the sides of this door, when made during the winter time, it'll be just perfect during the summer. And a dime will suffice when you do that during the summer. Now the panels in here are solid wood panels, and they will have a tendency to rattle sometimes during the winter as that board shrinks a little bit. To stop that from happening, take some inexpensive backer rod. This is for insulation. Cut these into small pieces and drop them in the grooves in those rails. When you put the panel inside, that will not rattle anymore because that little spacer will keep some slight pressure on that raised panel. On a chest like this, it would be very hard to find a piece of walnut this big any place, so what we had to do is edge glue this one. And one of the problems that edge gluing causes with any large piece of wood like this is expansion. And it's going to move a lot depending upon the humidity that it's placed in. So we've done a couple different things on this that you'll appreciate to kind of keep that from causing a problem. When we put these stays in, and you'll see the 3 of them there, this outside screw hole, if screwed in tightly, would not allow that board to move. So what we've done is we've elongated that screw hole in the back, so as the wood expands and contracts with seasonal changes, that wood can actually move without loosening the screw. And if this were a tabletop and we wanted to secure it to this base, we'd use a slightly different attachment system. We'd be using one of these Z-clips. We would cut a saw kerf across this edge and insert this Z-clip into the saw kerf and then screw it up through the bottom into the top. That would allow that top to stay flat and fully secured and still move with seasonal moisture changes. And how much can a solid wood top move? Well, that depends on a lot of factors. Both the species of the wood, the orientation of the grain, flat sawn versus quarter sawn, the temperature and humidity that may be exposed to. A lot of different things can affect it. The short answer is that even a small, glued up solid wood tabletop is going to move. And you have to understand that fact. If you don't allow for that movement, the stresses in the board will either cause it to split or force the other joints in that glue up to spread. Now you've heard me talk a lot about flat sawn and quarter sawn wood, and I'd like to show you the difference. Here's a couple of samples of those boards. The top one is quarter sawn, the bottom one here is flat sawn. On the quarter sawn, you'll see that the end grain runs vertically, very easy to see on the side. And on flat sawn, which is also called plain sawn, you can see the end grain runs horizontally. The differences also appear on the surface. On this quarter sawn piece, you'll see an awful lot of what they call raise and flex, some interesting points of this wood. And on the flat sawn, you'll actually see the rills that are created by the flat sawn cutting. And the nice part about quarter sawn wood is that it's far more stable than flat sawn. It will expand and contract about half as much as flat sawn, so it's much easier to control in some of these larger projects. We've used this almost exclusively in the projects we've done with craftsman type furniture.